I hate to point out flaws, but every previous speaker has been very remiss in not pointing out what a good-looking group this is. And I was apprehensive about speaking to you, so I Googled public speaking. And they surveyed 1,000 people and asked them what their greatest fear in life was. And it was public speaking, even greater than death. So the next time you go to a funeral, the guy giving the eulogy might be willing to trade places with the guy in the box. Okay. That's the pointer, that's the advancer. Okay. My father told me this 60 years ago. He said, if you're willing to do something your neighbor won't do, or able to do something your neighbor can't do, there's usually, not always, usually some money in it. And he said pigs fall into both those categories. They're hard, dirty work, so some people aren't willing to do it. They take stockmanship and management ability, so some people aren't able to do it. And so my whole career, I've got to work with hardworking, talented people. I don't see the dot, but that's okay. But my whole career, I got to work with hardworking, talented people. What a blessing. Okay. And Mike said some nice things about me, and I appreciate it, but he's a kind man. I've never heard him cuss anybody yet. But this presentation isn't over either. But, so, if I have been of service to this industry, it is because of all the help I receive from other people. I got a lot of friends out here. A lot of people know me really well, and they know I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. So, I've had to have help. And one thing, you know, our industry, Steve Henry gave a presentation a few years ago, and he talked about in 1970 there were 680,000 pork producers, and now there's about 68,000. And so I worried about consolidation, that it'd be all proprietary and deep, dark secrets, trade secrets, and nobody would help one another. That has not happened. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. People are still willing to share. And then some examples of that is that I was at a place and they were using corn gluten feed. And corn gluten feed, there's nothing wrong with it as an ingredient, but I've never seen it be a good buy for pigs. And I thought, well, what the hell's going on? So I called John Less at ADM, who makes the stuff, and we looked at their nutrient loadings, and this company had a way optimistic energy value for corn gluten feed. So John helped me. There's a guy from Chad Risley in Pennsylvania. He had a bunch of broken bones. He sent me the diets. You looked at the piece of paper, they were fine. It had the right amount of calcium and phosphorus, but when I reconstructed the diets, I didn't find that much calcium because he had a bad loading value for calcium on his wheat mitts. So those things happen. So I helped him. I had to do some diets for some acuity sired pigs. I can't even spell acuity. So I called Omar at Mashoff's, and Omar helped me. So this is a great industry. People will help you, but I do encourage you to reciprocate. If they help you, you got to help people back. And Mike said I've helped some people, and I hope that's true. So we're going to share our knowledge. I only met Wayne Mashoff one time. I only met him for 10 minutes, and he said this 30 years ago, and I remembered it. He said, 2 heads are better than one, even if one's a head of cabbage. And he was looking right at me when he said that, head of cabbage. Okay. And it's okay not to know. There is no limit to what I don't know. But it's not okay not to try to find out. Okay? Try to find somebody who does know. Okay, so I must say this a lot because Dr. Lou that I worked with made me a coffee cup. So smart people learn from their mistakes. The really sharp one learns from other people's mistakes. But that was a little negative. So I added to it. but also learn from their successes. We want to learn from people. This works for somebody. Maybe I can make it work for me too. So this is before my time, but this is such an interesting story. I think it's such an interesting story. You guys be the judge if I'm full of prunes or not, but I think this is a really interesting story, and I wanted to share it with you, okay? So before World War II, soy oil was not considered an edible oil. Had a bad smell, had a bad taste. But the American Army was over fighting the Germans over there, and the Germans were able to cook with soy oil, so why couldn't we? So they assigned a chemist, this Goss, to Patton's army, and he went over and studied to see what the heck the Germans were doing. And then he came back and worked with another chemist, this Dutton, and they found out that soy oil was intolerant of copper and iron contamination. So we were using brass and rolled steel here. The Germans were using stainless steel. So we went to stainless steel and progressed on. And this story was preserved by Dave Baker. And so Dave's gone now, and I don't want this story to be lost, okay? But we still couldn't feed corn soy diets. We had to have APF, animal protein factor. And if we didn't have that, pigs grew 20% slower, and it took 7 to 10% more feed. I mean, this is bigger than Paline, right? APF is hell, Paline. If Elanco had this, they'd charge the hell out of you for it, okay? Sorry about that. Okay, so they saw in human nutrition that B12 was involved in this pernicious anemia. And so Newman, he wondered if that wasn't, anyway, he fed it to pigs, and you didn't need animal protein factor if you fed B12. And he figured this out in 1948 or so, didn't publish the paper till 1950, but it wasn't being adapted. People were still feeding animal protein, and nobody was feeding a corn soy diet. So Gene Becker was the head of the animal science department at the University of Illinois, and he got the extension folks, and they went out and they promoted that. And the first two producers to feed corn soy diets were Russ Jekyll and George Brower. And I met both those guys when I lived in Illinois. And I didn't know this story then, but I wish I would have, because I would have asked them some questions. Okay, so what happened? Okay, from when I was born in 1953, compared to when I graduated from high school in 1971, 1971, not 1871. Okay, anyway, there was a threefold increase in soybean acres. Isn't that amazing? Isn't that amazing? Okay, so this I'm going to have a lot of other people's quotes, but this is one I made up myself, okay? So knowledge is knowing something. So Newman knew that B12 was important in pigs, or in people. Wisdom was he applied it to pigs, and then Becker used that wisdom to help others, to help producers. And I think that's noble. Helping others is noble. All right, but they had to go out and sell that, and sometimes sales has a negative connotation. Nobody wants to grow up and be a damn salesperson, right? But you are. Everybody's a salesperson. You got to sell your wife on ideas. You got to sell your kids on ideas. You got to sell upper management up, and that might be the hardest one because they're the dumbest ones. And then you got to sell the guys that are closest to the pigs. So you're going to sell. So it shouldn't have negative connotations. And Becker went out and the extension people sold the idea of corn, soybean meal diets. So I really like that story, and I wanted to share it with you. Okay. So you do things for people not because of who they are or what they can do for you. Hopefully not because of who they are, and hopefully not because what they can do for you, but because it's the right thing to do, because who you are. This is a small, this industry is small, and you want to be, you're not always going to be right, but you always want to tell the truth because you're going to get found out. So just do the right thing. Okay, so I jumped from 1950 to 1970. So this is 50 years in 50 minutes. So, all right, so I got to jump a little bit. Otherwise, we'd be here till Tuesday. All right, so Bob Fritchen was in northeast Nebraska. They had pigs that had, when they were born, they had excessive bleeding from the navel. They had, and back then, we castrated pigs at 5, 6, 7 weeks age, and they had excessive bleeding at castration. And even the most amazing one, underneath the pig's chins, eaten out of self-feeders, they'd be bruised there. So Bob was aware that vitamin K is the clotting factor in humans, and so he fed vitamin K and solved the problem. Okay, so why didn't we ever need vitamin K before? Well, in theory, the bacteria in the intestines synthesize some vitamin K, and then the pig eats enough of his own manure. That's, I can't say that word, but that's eat your own manure. And so, and even I practiced that word 3 or 4 times this morning, and I still can't say it. So, all right. So maybe a big dose of antibiotics. They theorized it had something to do with mycotoxin loads. But we today still feed vitamin K. And so, well, that's ancient history. That's 1970, that's 50 years ago. I don't have to worry about that. Mike had that experience. They had a producer that was using the wrong VTM, didn't have any vitamin K, and what the hell happened? Same thing. Okay. Can your zip code determine your nutrition program? So this also occurred in my lifetime. So they used to say that states that border the Great Lakes are low in selenium, and some people say the states east of the Mississippi, but it's a little spottier than that. But Kansas doesn't have to worry much about it. Okay? So what happens if you have a selenium deficiency? The sows are slow to farrow. You'll have weak pigs that are lethargic and reluctant to nurse, and maybe more splay-laid pigs. And you'll probably have some sudden death in your nursery in some of the best pigs, mulberry heart. So we couldn't even feed selenium until 1974. Then we could feed 1/10 of a part per million. And then in 82, we could feed 3/10 part per million up to 50 pounds. And then shortly after that, I couldn't find exactly when, we could add 3.3 parts to all diets. So in 1974, they put this slide up in the nutrition class, and I didn't think it was of use whatsoever. So you see that S up at the top, and there's an arrow that goes to, S is sulfur. It goes to selenium. Thank you, Josh. Okay, so if you have rotten egg water, high sulfur water, you probably ought to pay a little more attention to your selenium level, because sulfur doesn't do anything good for the utilization of selenium. And I saw that happen in Tennessee, okay? And maybe a little bit of nutritional trivia. Purdue had a study where too much phosphorus probably didn't do anything good for selenium utilization either. So has anybody got a sheep? Not a damn one. All right. Okay, so anyways, for another nutritional trivia is molybdenum. Sheep have tend to get copper toxicity. And if you want to, there's some people that add a little molybdenum, I can say that one, molybdenum, and that interferes with the copper utilization. You'll have less toxicity in your sheep, copper toxicity. So Dr. Pale, when I was at the University of Nebraska, I did graduate, but they didn't give me a diploma because I didn't pay my parking tickets. Okay, so anyway, Dr. Pale said this: the questions stay the same every year, it's just the answers are different. And I thought that was I did not think that was a very intelligent thing to say, because I thought the answer's the answer. 2 + 2 is 4, right? The sun sets in the west, right? That's the answer. Go on. But his point was, what we want to answer every year is how to grow a pig cost effectively. And there's lots of things that enter into that. So the question stays the same. The question's the same every year. It's just the answers are different. So he was right and I was wrong. Nobody seems surprised by that. Doggone. Okay, so the most cost-effective feeding program may not be the one that gives us the best gain in feed conversion. You know, we talked about fat prices this morning. And it likely will not be the same this year as it was last year. And it ain't going to be the same next year either. So you got to be flexible. You got to be open-minded. Okay, so what are some of the changes that happened in this 50 years? So 50 years ago, we balanced on crude protein. And we actually balanced a little bit more on ingredients than nutrients. For example, we balanced a diet crude protein 16% for a 50 to 100 pound pig. And we knew that we didn't want to use more than 5% meat and bone meal because we kind of knew that we'd be low in tryptophan. And we didn't have crystalline tryptophan then. We'll get to that part. So you kind of balanced. Oh, and sunflower meal. You didn't want to use too much sunflower meal because you'd be low in lysine. Okay, so we sort of did it on crude protein. And then we went to total amino acids because we could measure those. And that was an improvement, but a bigger improvement was when we went to digestible. Now, it's a smaller step. It was a big step from crude protein to total, and a big step to some form of digestibility. But it was little steps between apparent and true and standardized. It's better where we're at today, but it was little improvements there. Okay, so here's an example. You see that total lysine down at the bottom, 0.7, 0.76, 0.83. So that was the total lysine, but the available lysine was the same. And so therefore, the performance was the same. More predictable performance if we understand the digestibility of our amino acids. This Kanabe fella, he also showed us, and one of the products he worked with a lot was with meat and bone meal, and he showed the kind of dryer that you had could have a big effect on how digestible your amino acids were. In some cases, meat and bone meal, the digestibility was close to soybean meal, and sometimes it was 20% less. And then, since we're talking about meat and bone meal, and you guys are dying to hear about meat and bone meal, that Dr. Cromwell, who grew up in Salina, and graduated from K-State, Tom Burnell, and them, they were doing phosphorus digestibilities with meat and bone meal, and they found the particle size was important. Tom Burnell, you know, if it was 30% of this, some of the samples had particle sizes of 4 millimeters, and so Chad Paul helped me figure out that 4 millimeters is just a little bit smaller than a BB, so pretty big chunks. So if you're using meat and bone meal, that phosphorus may not be 90% available. It may be closer to 70 if you got big chunks of bone in there. A little bit of nutritional trivia. Okay. The pig eats to meet his energy needs. So column 1, we don't add any fat. Column 2, we added lots of fat, and we increased the amino acids to, well, in this case, protein, but it's amino acids to achieve the same ratio of energy to amino acids as we did with no added fat. But if we just add energy, the last column, and don't add any more amino acids, we're not going to get much bang for that buck or several bucks that we spent on the fat. So lysine calorie ratio is important, and that was a fairly recent concept, 1985. And probably the poultry guys figured that out before we did, and we borrowed that concept and proved that concept in pigs. Okay, the pig has changed. So PIC and the genetic DNA and the genetic companies that get these pigs, they're putting down more muscle every day on less feed. So it just makes sense that that feed needs to be more concentrated. In 1988, for a 50-pound pig, lysine level is 0.84. So were we that damn dumb in 1984 1988? No, the pig has changed. And today, people are feeding closer to 1.3 digestible lysine in that size pig. I can remember when K-State came out and said we need 1.25 total lysine in that 25 to 50 pound pig, and that was a big deal. And then I remember, I think it was Terry Whedon, he was a student here then, and we talked about, well, isn't it amazing, Terry, that pig needs 1.25% lysine here, and then we haul him across the yard and put him in the grower barn, haul him 50 yards, and his lysine requirement's only 0.8. Well, that didn't make sense, and then so K-State figured out that, well, maybe from 50 to 75 pounds, we needed a diet somewhat between those levels. So that was good stuff. Productivity has changed. Okay, so, it's all about me. It's all about me. All right, so when I graduated from high school, 1971, compared to last year, with a breeding herd of 2.4 million less sows, 2.4 million, not sows, that was a misnomer. 2.4 smaller breeding herd. Because remember in 71 we had a lot more boars than we have today. Okay, so 1971, compared to last year, we produced we harvested 30 million more pigs with 2.4 million less sows. Smaller breeding herd, not sows. Okay? I think that's just amazing. So we went from 11 pigs per breeding herd to 20. The tools have changed. We got more tools in our toolbox. We got things we can do. And I won't give Keith Hayden any credit for this because he'll just go right to his head, but he helped me with some of these dates, okay? So, 40 years ago, we just had lysine and methionine. And that's a big deal today. So if you take a corn soy diet, those two amino acids will save you about $9 with this crazy soy price that we have right now. 30 years ago, we got threonine. 15 years ago, we got tryptophan. 5 years ago, I'm probably saying that poorly. It's not that they became cost effective then. We had them for experiments. We had them. You could get them. You just couldn't afford them. So 30 years ago, threonine became cost competitive. 15 years ago, tryptophan became cost effective. 5 years ago, valine came cost. So if you add all those crystalline amino acids today in a corn soy diet without distillers and all that jazz, it's pretty close to $20 a ton. So that's a big deal. It's a big deal. So we have more tools in our toolbox. So in 1995, that was the first phytase that came out. BASF had phytase. And it wasn't cost effective. It wouldn't save you any money. The only people that were using it, that was somebody that was landlocked that couldn't apply any more phosphorus to their soil. So it was a big deal for the poultry guys in the Delmarva Peninsula. And probably a big thing at Premium Standard Farms because they were landlocked. Anyway, but today, there's 8 suppliers of phytase at least, and Jordan put together a really nice tool there on phytase on the KSU website, and there's at least 8 suppliers there. And today, the corn soy diet, no distillers, using phytase is about $5 a ton. And that's a grower diet. It'd probably be a little less than that in a finisher diet, but it's significant. Trust me, it's significant. Okay, but you know how your mother told you never to run with scissors? Your mother tell you that? Yes, okay, all right. So scissors is a useful tool, and phytase is a useful tool, but you want to, it can bite you. Okay, I had a guy that had a bunch of broken bones, and the problem was his VTM, he wasn't rotating it. So he had some VTM that was a year old because he kept putting the new stuff in front and using that. So the only thing that gets better with age is whiskey and meat, okay? That's the 2 things, all right. So anyway, he wasn't rotating, so he had broken bones because all the phytase was gone. Okay, VTM identification, another guy had a bunch of broken bones because he thought he was buying a VTM with phytase in it, and it wasn't. He'd gotten the wrong stuff. Okay, proper release. And I've seen this one twice, and it isn't that you shouldn't give phytase release for things beyond phosphorus and calcium, but I encourage you to be careful when you do that. Okay, so 2 different occasions, the guy, he wanted to give phytase, 2 different people, not educated at K-State, okay, that wanted to give phytase a release for amino acids, and made a math error. And so his feed efficiency went to Kaflooey, went to pot, and he asked me to look at the diets, and so I reconstructed the diets, and I said, what do you think your threonine ratio is? And he said, this. And I said, well, that's what it says on the piece of paper, but when I reconstruct your diets, I don't see near that much. Well, he had made a math error. And so if you're going to give it loadings for things, I would encourage you to set up 2 ingredients, one with the loadings, one without, offer it to the formulas and see how much it changes things. See if that's logical. See if it sort of makes sense to you, how much it changes. You know, is it replacing 5 pounds of threonine? Not likely. Okay. And the feedstuffs have changed. Distillers, holy smokes. We might be using more corn for fuel now than we used to feed all the horses when we were a horse drown industry. And so 2005, Distillers, the biofuels, pretty dramatic increase. And so we didn't know much about feeding Distillers because, and what we knew was based on old drying technology. Back to Kanabe in 85, so 20 years later, what he taught us about drying had application, because if you're getting your Distillers from where they made whiskey, not because whiskey's bad, but they've been making it a long time, they had old technology dryer. That's an actual picture. I took that black stuff, that was out of an old-timey dryer, and the new Distillers is lots better and lots more digestible. But Distillers came on so fast, and we didn't really know much about it, and so they had to price it really competitive to get it to go, and so we needed to figure it out, and we did figure it out, mostly figured it out, because we've learned a few things just in the last 5 years to help us use Distillers better. Okay, so I talked about how Kanabe, 85 versus 2005, 20 years. Well, Harry Truman said the only thing new is history you're not aware of, okay? So here's an 80-year-old story. Okay, so in 1926, Ellis found out if you dig the peanuts, but there's still peanuts left, so you turn the hogs out to clean up the peanuts. Peanuts are full of oil, and the pig takes on the characteristics of the fat he's fed. And so they had soft pork in 1926. In 2005, we started having soft pork too. Why is that? Because Distillers had 9 or 10% fat in it, and it was corn oil, so it was soft. Diet isn't the only thing that affects fat firmness. There's other things. The leaner a pig is, usually the softer they are. A pig that grows slower, so a sick pig, will be softer. That when you close out a barn, those pigs that when you close out the barn, they'll be softer than the first ones. Gender, gilts are leaner than barrows, so gilts will be softer. The bigger they get, the harder they are usually, because the fatter they are. Ractopamine used to make pigs a little softer, and then pelleting. Pelleting makes them a little softer, and I think it's because it ruptures all those fat cells in that corn, so they get every bit of corn oil they can out of there. And if you are going to sell pigs and the guy's going to have an iodine value target for you to hit, I think you want to know where they're measuring that, taking that fat sample, because it'll help you determine, if they're taking it at the jowl, you need to start controlling your iodine value of your diet way earlier than if they're taking it at the belly. Okay? Okay, so how about distillers? It came on, you know, nothing ever changes, right? You know, sun still sets in the west, 2 + 2 is still 4. Nah. Okay, so 1 bushel of corn, you make 17 pounds of distillers, and the rest of it went into ethanol, okay? Well, then, since corn oil is so valuable, those smart guys figured out that they'll extract some of the oil. Okay, in that 17-pound distillers, that stuff probably had 97% the energy of corn. So, pretty high energy stuff. Then they started taking out some of the corn oil. And so then, when you got distillers that are 5 or 6%, 4, 5 or 6% fat, it's probably only got 80% the energy of corn. All right, so you'd think, well, the changes should be over, but no, changes aren't over yet. So now the distillers plants, they're making stuff they call distillers, and they still got the corn oil, but then they're extracting out this 2.5 to 5 pounds of a high protein product along with the ethanol. So we need to be aware of, and there's not very many plants doing that now yet, but 5 or 6, but because there's going to be money made. There'll be more. I predict there'll be more, and we'll need to know more about these distillers. These distillers are going to be different than those distillers. And since fat's so expensive, don't be surprised if they figure out how to even extract more corn oil out of distillers. Okay, fat. Okay, so that fat price is off a Jacobson letter, and I think that was restaurant grease price. And then that corn price was the high and the low Chicago futures, just the arithmetic average of the high month and the low month, and then so that figures the corn fat ratio. So if fat's 3 times the price of corn, it's a knock you naked good deal. All right, that's a technical term. Okay, and it gets to 4 times, you better sharpen your pencil. But you got better tools than my rules of thumb there. You got a K-State model and a PIC model that'll help you with your diet costs and the price of pigs, help you figure out what energy level you should be feeding. But I don't expect it to go back to 3 times the price of corn anytime soon. And so why is that? This is why that is. And so Joe Kearns, you know, he always, one thing I appreciate about Joe is he's not afraid to make a bold statement, even though years later I'll remind him how wrong he was. So 2 years ago, this goal for biofuels was 1.2 billion gallons. In 2030, it's going to be 5.9 billion. So I don't see fat getting cheap. But I could be wrong like Joe Kearns is, but I won't. And then the other thing is that Chad and Charles are going to have some challenges because there's still people that are adding some fat to lubricate to get it through a pellet mill, or having to add some phosphate to get enough grit to run it through a pellet mill. And phosphate's 21 dical's $900 to $1,000 a ton. Fat's 55, 60 cents a pound. Maybe there's a better way. Maybe there's a more cost-effective way. And I got a lot of faith in those two guys to figure that out for us. Right? Right, okay. Okay. So respect and listen to the people doing the hard jobs. No calluses on my hands, right? I got an easy job. Okay. So listen to the people that are doing the hard jobs. Okay, and I'll give you some examples. How am I doing on time? Okay. Okay, so when tribasic copper chloride first came out, it was cheaper per unit of copper than copper sulfate. And copper sulfate's 25% copper, and tribasic was 58% copper. And so, but that tribasic copper was dusty and nasty to handle, and you had to put it in the damn microbin, and it blew up in your face, and it was nasty. So I go over to the feed mill, and Tom Delameter's there, and I said, Tom, what do you think of that new stuff? I hate it. Okay. And I said, well, it saves us, I don't know, 3 cents a ton or some damn thing. And I said, you're only going to dump half as many bags. Okay, I'm good with that. He saw the big picture, saved a little money. He was going to dump less bags. Life was good. Liquid lysine. We used liquid lysine, and we were successful with it the best we can tell. Was that because I was so damn smart? No, I had nothing to do with that. It was because I had a really good maintenance guy, and he was religious. That's not a good choice. He'd be checking the meters to make sure they were right. Todd Seymour. He was, not religious, what's a good word? Dedicated. Anyway, he checked at that. And then there was a lady, Rita Tuggle, in accounting, feed mill accounting, and she said, well, we should have used this much liquid lysine, and this is how much our inventory changed, so we were good. So there's 2 people that had my back to make us successful with that. Tennessee farmers. There was a guy that was unloading a rail car of corn, and some dust came out as soon as he opened the hopper up. So he shut the leg off. Well, he didn't even have the leg on yet, thank goodness. Dropped it in the pit, and he went and got somebody. Well, that carload had been hauling the pesticide before it hauled corn. So, but it never went to the bin. It never went to the pigs. It never went to the dairy cows. So you got to respect those people. They're important. Yeah. Formulas. We used to make a formula, and you'd send it to a paper copy to the guy at the mill. And the guy at the mill that entered them usually was someone who'd been there a long time, experienced, and if something looked goofy, most of them delighted in calling you and telling you that, Wayne, you're a moron. Okay, so and I was good with that because I want to do it right if it wasn't. But today, you send things electronically, and I have concerns that I'm the only person that looks at that formula. So if someone calls me and says, Wayne, this formula doesn't look right, are you sure you want that? I thank them profusely because they're going to save me from having a wreck someday. So I thank them. Dave Remus. Okay, Dave Remus is the opposite of me. Dave Remus doesn't say 7 words in a week. Okay? Dave Remus, he drove a reclaim truck. So these nurseries did not have tandem bins, and so you would reclaim the plant. When you got to the end of the turn, you'd reclaim the feed to put the next feed in. He said, so Dave said a week's worth of words to me one day. He said, Wayne, I want you to ride with me. However many words that is. That was a week's worth. So I did. And we went out there, and you could see when he was reclaiming, this is the end of the turn, but you could tell by the color of the feed that a lot of it was still the first diet, the one that cost $600 a ton instead of the one that cost $150 a ton. So he didn't say anything, which is typical for Dave Remus. But so what did we do? We talked to the guys at the farm about, okay, when you get to about day 5 or 6, because that's how long the allocation was going to last, raise those tubes. We want that feed in the feeders, not in the bin, because a bulk bin, it feeds from the top down, unless you get clear down into the cone, and then you're probably okay. But anyway, so raise those tubes at the end. We changed our nursery budget a little bit, and we changed our delivery day a little bit. So all that, so we weren't wasting that feed. So you had to listen to them. And so, but I do have a word of caution. A word of caution. Their observations are very valuable to you making the decision. But take their solutions with a grain of salt. And the reason that is not because they're deceiving you, it's just that they just see this much of the picture, and hopefully in your position, you're going to see a little bigger picture. It's not that they're... I have a friend, I guess he's a friend, but he told me I was educated beyond my intelligence. And so it's not that I'm smarter than them. It's that I have access to a bigger picture. Okay. My brother said there's $100 an hour jobs and $10 an hour jobs, and so sometimes we have to help with prioritization. And one reason you go to One reason I go to a farm is I'm not going to diagnose a zinc deficiency or a folic acid toxicity, but you maybe can see what the people can and cannot implement. And Kyle likes this one. I said that knowing the right, Dean Dow said this first. Dean Dow said that knowing the right thing isn't necessarily a trick. Being able to implement it is the trick. So, but I believe that people are basically good and that nobody wants to do a bad job. And our job is to help them be successful, however way we can. Sometimes little changes in budgets or things like that can make the budget easier to implement and easier to get done right. Gary Ali said this one time, and I thought it was pretty profound, and I wrote it down. A nutritionist's role is to face, evaluate, and solve problems. I thought that was pretty good. Mark Twain said this, it ain't what you don't know that gets you in trouble, it's what you know that ain't exactly so. So, you want to keep an open mind. You want to learn, you want to keep an open mind, open to new concepts. The Spanish have a proverb, the wise man will change his mind, a fool never. I don't know, my wife would argue which category I fall into, but Gary Lewis says this, we reserve the right to get smarter. So if I ask Josh something and he tells me this, and in 2 years he tells me something different, it isn't that Josh lied to me. It's just that he has learned more. We know better. We hope to improve. We hope to be better every day. What do we need to learn more about? Everybody in this room has an opinion on how to grow a developing gilt, and you can shove all the research under your thumbnail. You know, we need to know more, because that was pretty sobering, the number that was shown this morning, how our sow death loss is. So can we do something about that? Is that a genetics problem? Is that a nutrition problem? I don't know, but it's a problem, and we need to figure out if there's anything we can do, we ought to do it, okay? Talked about lower energy diets. Kind of the same thing. I think we're going to be feeding lower energy diets, so is there any adjustments we need to make? Can we overcome some of that with more linear inches of feeder space? Can we overcome some of that with lower stocking density? Do we have to worry about summertime more because you're going to be feeding higher fiber and more heat increment, or we're going to have to do a better job of cooling our pigs? Are we going to go back to Bob Hines' thing where he compared misters to drip cooling we're going to have to do something better? Sow nutrition, I never thought you could produce 30 pigs per sow per year, and we got people marketing that now. So, wow, we got a lot to learn. And that sow nutrition, is there anything that we can do nutrition-wise that help on this livability? Soybean meal versus crystalline amino acids, that's a useful tool, and I think there's things that we're going to learn there about more interactions, because, you know, I said we learned something in the last 5 years about distillers that we didn't know in 2005, and that's how excess leucine doesn't, if your leucine to lysine ratio gets wider, you probably have to increase your isoleucine and your valine, and that was shown at K-State, that was shown at South Dakota State, and so is there other things that we're going to learn like that? I think there could be. This third generation distillers, I already beat that horse to death, but I think we're going to learn some things about that. Okay, ancient pig in a modern world. Okay, so the pig, he's designed to walk on dirt. And in the 1970s, there was a guy, that Bob Fritchen, the vitamin K guy, that's when slats were new. Confinement was pretty new. And so he looked at plastic slats versus steel slats versus narrow slats versus wide slats versus concrete slats, narrow or wide, ones with penciled edge or ones with sharp edge. And he put pigs on them, and he turned them upside down and scored their feet and tried to figure out what was the kindest surface for a pig. And I think that when the biggest cause of removal, we saw that today, was lameness. Maybe we need to revisit that. Do I think anybody's going to do that? Probably not. So that was a little esoteric and maybe a waste of your time. But maybe somebody will do something with that. Hyatt's excited about it, I can tell back there. Okay, we're getting to the short rows now. Okay, have you ever heard that expression, getting to the short rows? Okay, because I thought maybe that was a family thing, because the field behind our house was kind of pie-shaped, and the rows ran across the piece of pie, not the length of the piece of pie. And so you'd be out there cutting weeds or doing whatever, and you were always glad when you were getting towards the short rows, because you're about to go faster then. Okay, so I was getting on an airplane the other day, whatever that tube is that connects the terminal to the airplane. A jetway, is that the right term? Anyway, all right, I was in that tube, and there was a lady behind me, and I said, "How are you?" And she said, "Grateful." And I thought that was the best answer I'd ever got to that question. So what are some things that I'm grateful for? I'm grateful for the producers of Kansas and the administration of Kansas to maintain a strong swine program here. There used to be more swine days. There used to be more swine research. There used to be at other universities, but they've dwindled. But K-State has had the vision to maintain that. So I'm grateful for that, because K-State's been a lot of help to me. Okay, I'm grateful that I've had the opportunity to apply the wisdom as others. I tell people I'm not an architect, I'm a carpenter. You tell me how many trusses you want up there, I'll get the trusses up there. But don't ask me to design the webbing that goes in the trusses. I want to apply it. I don't want to figure it out, I want to apply it. Okay, so I'm grateful I got to apply the wisdom of others. Okay, and so this part over here on the right, on this contentment, I was walking across the parking lot, and there was a potato chip bag laying on the ground, so I picked it up to throw it in the trash. Of course, I had to read the damn thing, right? And so that's what it said on the back of the potato chip bag. So you never want to miss an opportunity to learn something. I thought that was really profound. I thought that was really good, and it was on a piece of trash. Okay, and the other thing I want to thank K-State for is training, and you saw it today. What a great group of students, and I've had the pleasure and the privilege of working with some of their graduates, and they're good people and they're well trained. And FDR said that we can't always build the future for our kids, but we can build our youth for the future. And I think that's what's happening here. Okay, how much time we got left? 5 minutes. Okay. There's a book. My brother got this book for Christmas, I don't know, 20 or 30 years ago. And you know how, okay, so I was looking at this book, and he was leaving the next morning, and I was looking at this book that evening, and it was so interesting to me, I stayed up the whole night and read the book. Okay, and in this book, you know how a drawing, a caricature is a drawing that exaggerates a person's features. Well, this was sort of a written caricature. So one chapter was Welcome to the World of White Slavery. So that was about a dairy farmer who said, I don't know if I ever made any money milking these cows, but I never got far enough away from home to spend any. Okay. But another chapter is about Harry the Hog Man. And Harry the Hog Man is always happy. Because when he's making money, he's making money. And he knows, and if he's losing money, he knows it isn't going to be terrible far down the road or down in the future that he'll be making a lot of money. So I hope that Harry the Hog Man is right, because we've had enough of this other stuff for a while. So now we'll go to Stump the Chump. I think that's the last slide. Yeah.
All right. All right, Wayne, we're not going to let you get off that easy. You back up here. We have any questions for Wayne and all the things that he's seen in his lifetime in the industry and all the help he's been for a lot of of us, including me.
Yeah, or vice versa.
Any questions for Wayne as we wrap up the afternoon?
I'm standing between you and ice cream. Keep that in mind. Okay, Dan Garrity is going to ask me this question. Dan's going to ask me, what was the first nutritional decision you ever made? Swine nutritional decision. Okay, so I had the sows down below the house. Creek runs by the house. Creek dumps into the river. River comes up fast. Creek is flooded. River goes down fast. And it strands all these fish in these mud puddles along that creek. Well, the sows are out there, so I'm supposed to be feeding them 3 pounds of shelled corn and a pound of protein concentrate. So I'm out there, I've got my bucket and I got my bag, and those sows are catching those fish in those mud puddles. So I didn't need to give them that protein supplement, I just gave them the corn. That was my first nutritional. I was about 11 when that happened.
My question is, how big is your Rolodex?
Oh, how many people? Yeah.
How many? I know you call probably half the people in this room at one time or another.
On Saturdays and Sundays and nights. Yeah, because, well, I said it. If it's okay not to know, and there's no limit to what I don't know. But there's a lot of smart people in this room that are willing to help you, because hopefully someday I will return the favor. Hopefully I will. I can't promise I will. Okay, when Hayden Williams calls, I said, okay, Hayden, what's the rule? He says, half the stuff you tell me is wrong. My job is to figure out which half. and that's the truth, because if I knew it was wrong, I wouldn't tell it to him. But half the stuff I tell you is wrong. You got to figure out which half, because I don't know.